The restaurant glowed with golden light, champagne glasses clinking, laughter echoing through marble halls. A little girl clutched her father's hand, eyes brimming with tears. "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave." Silence fell. The young man lifted his daughter, walking past tables filled with contemptuous stares. At the VIP table, CEO Isabella Lane watched them go. She had no idea that tonight, this man everyone looked down upon would change her life forever. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching this from. I'd really love to know. Evan Brooks had spent the entire afternoon preparing for this evening, pressing his only suit with hands that still bore traces of electrical grease no amount of scrubbing could completely remove. At 30 years old, he had learned to navigate the delicate balance between being a single father and maintaining the technical job that kept food on their table and a roof over their heads, though barely. His daughter Mia sat on their apartment's worn sofa, swinging her legs with the kind of innocent excitement that made his heart ache, with both joy and worry. She was 6 years old, with her mother's gentle eyes and a smile that could light up their small world even on the darkest days since his wife had passed 2 years ago. "Daddy, are we really going to a fancy restaurant?" Mia asked, her voice carrying that particular mixture of wonder and disbelief that characterized children who had learned early that magic happened in storybooks rather than real life. "We really are, sweetheart," Evan replied, kneeling down to adjust the ribbon in her hair, a small yellow bow that matched the second-hand dress he'd found at the thrift store, and altered himself. "It's a thank you party for the company's clients. I helped install their new electrical systems, so they invited us." The Grand Sterling Hotel rose before them like a palace constructed entirely of glass and ambition, its entrance guarded by valets in crisp uniforms who assessed arriving guests with practiced eyes that could calculate net worth from the quality of shoes and watches. Evan's worn leather dress shoes and absent timepiece immediately marked him as someone who didn't quite belong in this rarefied atmosphere. Inside the ballroom, circular tables draped in white linen hosted conversations about stock portfolios, vacation homes and destinations Evan couldn't pronounce, and business deals that casually mentioned figures exceeding his annual salary. He guided Mia to the table assigned to support staff and their families, noting how it occupied the room's periphery, while executives and major clients commanded the center positions beneath the chandelier's most flattering light. Mia's eyes grew wide at the sight of multiple forks arranged beside her plate, her confusion about which utensil served which purpose perfectly innocent and heartbreaking in equal measure. Evan leaned close, whispering gentle instructions about starting from the outside and working inward, trying to transform this intimidating social ritual into something resembling an adventure they could navigate together. The murmurs began during the appetizer course, voices pitched just loud enough to ensure they carried across the neighboring tables, while maintaining plausible deniability about intentional cruelty. A woman in a designer gown gestured toward their table with a diamond-encrusted hand, her words reaching Evan's ears despite the ambient noise of clinking silverware and polite conversation. Did they really bring a child to this event? And look at his suit, probably borrowed from a relative who actually works in finance? Her companion, a man whose gold cufflinks probably cost more than Evan's monthly rent, laughed with a particular brand of amusement that came from people who had never experienced vulnerability. "I heard he's just a technician." Someone probably felt sorry for him and extended a pity invitation. Mia's hand found Evan's beneath the table, her small fingers squeezing with pressure that communicated understanding beyond her years. She had learned to recognize the particular tone adults used when they were being deliberately unkind, had developed the unfortunate skill of making herself smaller in spaces where her presence was treated as an intrusion. Evan felt his jaw tighten as protective instincts warred with the practical knowledge that making a scene would only confirm these people's worst assumptions about him and potentially jeopardize the job that kept them afloat. He was preparing to quietly suggest they leave when Mia looked up at him with eyes that reflected both hurt and remarkable courage. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "We can leave." The simple dignity in those words, a 6-year-old child offering comfort to her father while simultaneously releasing him from the obligation to endure humiliation on her behalf, created a moment of absolute silence that rippled outward from their table like a stone dropped in still water. Across the ballroom, seated at the executive table reserved for the company's most important clients, Isabella Lane set down her wine glass with hands that trembled slightly from an emotion she couldn't quite name. At 31, she had built a financial empire through calculated decisions and carefully controlled emotions, earning her reputation as the Ice Queen who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without her expression betraying anything beyond cool professional competence. But watching this young father lift his daughter with tender care, his posture straightening with quiet dignity as he prepared to exit a space that had made clear they weren't truly welcome, Isabella felt something crack in the carefully constructed wall she had built around her heart. The casual cruelty of her fellow executives, the callous dismissal of a man whose crime was simply existing in their proximity while visibly struggling with circumstances beyond his control, it all suddenly seemed unbearably wrong in ways her usual rationalization couldn't dismiss. As Evan carried Mia toward the exit, the little girl's head resting against his shoulder while her small hand waved a polite goodbye to a room full of people who would forget her within minutes, Isabella found herself unable to look away. Something about their quiet grace in the face of deliberate unkindness had awakened feelings she thought she had successfully eliminated years ago, when she decided that emotional vulnerability was a luxury successful people couldn't afford. Isabella Lane's office occupied the top floor of Sterling Financial Tower, a glass-enclosed space offering panoramic views of the city she had conquered. Her desk held precisely arranged documents representing deals worth millions, yet the space felt cold despite expensive furnishings and carefully curated art. No family photos decorated her workspace. No personal mementos suggested interest beyond wealth and power. No signs of warmth penetrated her carefully maintained image. Her assistant Marcus had learned years ago not to expect pleasantries. Isabella's morning greeting consisted of launching directly into priorities without bothering with social niceties. Colleagues described her as brilliant but unapproachable, respected but never liked. Yet that morning, as Isabella reviewed quarterly reports, her mind kept returning to last night's dinner. The image of Evan Brooks lifting his daughter with gentle care, the quiet dignity in their exit, the way the child had comforted her father, it haunted her. "I don't understand what's wrong with me," Isabella muttered, frustrated by this unwelcome intrusion of sentiment into her disciplined thoughts. She had built success on believing emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. The revelation came that afternoon in the building's underground garage. Maintenance crews worked on electrical systems when suddenly a sharp crackling sound preceded the failure of overhead lighting. The garage plunged into darkness. Isabella gasped as hands caught her arms, steadying her. Emergency lighting flickered on, revealing Evan Brooks standing close, concern etched across his features. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Evan asked, his voice carrying genuine worry that had nothing to do with recognizing her status and everything to do with simple human concern. His hands, calloused from labor and bearing fresh marks from electrical work, remained gently supportive on her arms. Isabella found herself unable to form words as she stared at this man who had every reason to resent the world, yet who had just instinctively protected a stranger without hesitation. "I'm fine," she managed finally, her usually controlled voice slightly breathless. "Thank you for catching me." Evan stepped back respectfully, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Sorry about the oil." He gestured toward small smudges on her designer jacket. "The system had a fault. Should be fixed now." Isabella looked down at the stains marking her expensive fabric. Normally, this would trigger immediate annoyance, but instead she felt strange appreciation for these marks left by hands that worked to keep systems functioning, that held daughters with tender care, that caught falling strangers without calculating cost. "It's fine," Isabella said, surprising herself with sincerity. "Really, I'm more concerned about whether you're all right. That looked dangerous." Surprise flickered across Evan's face. He wasn't accustomed to people in expensive suits expressing concern for his well-being. "I'm used to working with electrical systems," Evan replied with a slight smile that transformed his face. "Part of the job. Though I have to admit, catching beautiful women isn't usually in the job description." The compliment, delivered without manipulation or agenda, without calculated flattery, made Isabella's face flush with warmth she hadn't experienced since college. I should let you get back to work, Isabella said, though her feet seemed reluctant to move. But thank you again for being there. As Isabella walked toward the elevator, she glanced back. Evan had already returned to work, his attention focused on the electrical panel with concentration that suggested pride in doing his job well. Something about his unself-conscious competence, his complete lack of interest in leveraging their encounter for career benefit, made Isabella's heart beat faster. That evening, alone in her penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Isabella found herself researching Evan Brooks through the company database. The sparse information revealed a man working as technical contractor for 3 years. Performance reviews consistently excellent. Personal details mentioned only that he was single parent, had declined promotions requiring travel or extended hours incompatible with childcare. The choice to prioritize his daughter over career advancement, to accept financial limitation rather than compromise availability for the child who depended on him, represented values so foreign to Isabella's experience. Yet something about Evan's willingness to remain in lower-paying position rather than sacrifice time with Mia suggested wealth that had nothing to do with bank accounts. Isabella walked to the window, pressing her palm against cold glass. She looked out at thousands of lit windows representing lives being lived with warmth and connection she had systematically eliminated. "What's happening to me?" she whispered to her reflection. For the first time in years, she saw not the composed CEO who terrified boardrooms, but a lonely woman who had traded everything meaningful for achievements that meant nothing when she returned each night to an empty apartment. The image of Evan lifting his daughter, of Mia's small hand resting trustingly against her father's shoulder, of their quiet dignity, these memories refused to fade. For the first time since building her empire, Isabella Lane felt her carefully constructed ice beginning to melt. If you've ever met a stranger who changed how you see life in just one moment, do you believe that's fate? Share your thoughts below. Isabella's decision to personally review the proposal for her company's new office building represented a departure from usual delegation. She justified it by telling herself quality control on major infrastructure deserved executive oversight. The fact that Evan Brooks was listed as lead contractor had nothing to do with her sudden interest, or so she told herself. The meeting took place in a conference room that felt too formal for discussing circuit breakers. Evan arrived precisely on time, carrying blueprints and documentation. "Ms. Lane," Evan began, spreading electrical plans across the table. "I've reviewed your building's current capacity and future needs. There are efficiency improvements we could implement to reduce long-term costs while improving reliability." Isabella found herself genuinely interested in his explanations. Evan's passion for his work transformed technical jargon into something approaching poetry as he described power flow and optimization. His competence was undeniably attractive, not just physical appearance, but the integrity evident in how he approached even mundane aspects of his profession. "This is impressive work," Isabella said honestly. "When can you start implementation?" Evan hesitated, measuring his words carefully. "I should mention I'll need to adjust schedule around my daughter's needs. I can work extended hours during school days, but I'll need to leave by 3 to pick her up. I can't accept assignments requiring overnight work or weekends when she's with me." The absolute priority he placed on parenting, delivered without apology despite speaking to a woman whose reputation for demanding total dedication was well documented, demonstrated remarkable courage. "That's completely acceptable," Isabella heard herself saying. "In fact, why don't you bring your daughter for the initial site inspection? I'd like to meet her properly." The invitation emerged before her rational mind could intervene with reasonable arguments against involving a 6-year-old in workplace activities. 3 days later, Mia Brooks entered Isabella's headquarters with wide eyes, taking in marble lobby and glass elevators. The little girl wore a sunflower yellow dress and carried a backpack decorated with cartoon characters. "Wow," Mia breathed as the elevator rose smoothly. "Daddy, we're flying." Evan's soft laugh carried tender amusement. "We're in an elevator, sweetheart." Isabella felt something twist in her chest, witnessing the easy affection between father and daughter. When had she last experienced such uncomplicated joy? The site inspection became unexpectedly delightful as Mia transformed serious business into adventure, complete with imaginative narratives about special cables that brought light like magic wands. Isabella watched Evan manage the delicate balance of conducting professional work while remaining completely present for his daughter. His ability to excel in both roles demonstrated competence her business education had never addressed. "Ms. Lane," Mia approached during a break with fearless directness. "Do you like working in such a tall building? Can you see your house from here?" The innocent questions made Isabella's throat tight. "I can't see my home from here," she answered truthfully, the admission carrying meaning beyond simple geography. "That's sad," Mia said with blunt assessment. "Everyone should be able to see their home. That's where the people who love you are." Evan's gentle correction, "Mia, that's not quite how it works," couldn't undo the simple truth his daughter had articulated. Isabella found herself blinking back tears as she confronted reality that her impressive office commanded views of everything, except what actually mattered. The afternoon concluded with Mia presenting Isabella a drawing, a crayon sketch showing three stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. "Ms. Isabella, Daddy and me," carefully labeled in uncertain handwriting. The gift, offered with shy pride and no expectation of reciprocation, represented pure generosity. Isabella's world of calculated exchanges had nearly made her forget existed. "Thank you, Mia," Isabella said, her voice catching. "This is beautiful. I'm going to put it in my office where I can see it every day." No. The little girl's delighted smile made Isabella's heart ache with longing for unconditional affection she had systematically removed from her life. As Evan and Mia prepared to leave, the little girl wrapped her arms around Isabella's legs in an impulsive hug that froze the usually composed CEO in place. "Mia likes you," Evan said quietly, gently extracting his daughter. "She doesn't warm up easily since her mother passed. You must have made quite an impression." The casual mention of his wife's death made Isabella realize how little she knew about challenges Evan had faced, while maintaining warmth and openness her privileged upbringing had failed to instill. Over following weeks, Isabella found increasingly transparent excuses to request Evan's presence. Their conversations gradually shifted from professional to personal as she asked about Mia's interests, Evan's parenting philosophy, daily realities of raising a child alone. Their relationship began shifting during a late afternoon when Isabella impulsively suggested continuing discussion over dinner, then panicked when Evan's expression turned apologetic. "I'd like that," he said carefully, "but I need to pick up Mia from after-school care in 30 minutes. I can't be late because they charge penalties I can't afford, and more importantly, she worries when I'm not there exactly when expected." The vulnerability in his admission made Isabella's decision instantaneous. "Bring her," she said firmly. "We'll go somewhere child-friendly. I'd love to spend more time with both of you." Dinner at a family restaurant became one of the most genuine evenings Isabella had experienced in years. Mia's enthusiastic commentary on her school day, detailed explanation of a science project, innocent questions about whether Isabella had ever wanted children, created authentic connection that corporate dinners never provided. "You've never thought about having kids?" Evan asked when Mia was occupied with coloring. Isabella's response emerged more honestly than intended. "I convinced myself children would interfere with career success, but watching you with Mia makes me wonder if I got my priorities exactly backwards." The admission acknowledged something fundamental about different paths their lives had taken. "I won't lie and say it's easy," Evan said quietly. "There are days I'm exhausted, worried about money, wondering if I'm doing enough. But then she laughs at something silly, or tells me what she learned, or just holds my hand while we walk home, and I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That night, lying alone in her apartment, Isabella acknowledged truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Evan Brooks and the life he represented, the authenticity and warmth her pursuit of wealth had eliminated. But the outside world wasn't prepared to accept a relationship crossing boundaries between executives and contractors, between wealth and working-class struggle. The gossip began when a columnist spotted Isabella leaving the restaurant with Evan and Mia. Within hours, social media exploded with speculation about the notoriously cold CEO dating a man whose financial situation made him completely inappropriate. The board requested an emergency meeting to discuss whether Isabella's personal choices were affecting company reputation. Their barely concealed disapproval made clear they viewed her relationship as liability. Isabella sat through the meeting maintaining composed exterior, while internally raging at hypocrisy of people who would applaud if she dated an equally wealthy executive. "I fail to see how my personal life affects quarterly earnings," Isabella said coldly when the chairman suggested she reconsider the optics. Pressure intensified when Evan's employer informed him his contract would not be renewed. The message was clear. His relationship with Isabella was creating complications. Evan appeared at Isabella's office late that evening, resignation breaking her heart. "I can't let you sacrifice everything for me," he said quietly, standing in the doorway. "Mia needs stability. I need work, and this relationship is destroying both." Isabella's response emerged fierce and immediate. "Don't you dare leave. You're the first person in years who's made me feel like a human being. You've taught me what actually matters, shown me what love looks like when it's real. I'm not letting you walk away because some small-minded people can't handle that I might choose happiness over their approval. If you believe that sometimes an ordinary person can change a heart that seemed frozen forever, subscribe to Solo Parent Stories for more stories like this." The termination letter arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday morning. Legal language dressed in corporate euphemisms that couldn't hide reality. Evan was being punished for being loved by someone whose social position made their relationship inconvenient. Evan read the letter 3 times, his hands steady despite churning anxiety as he calculated unemployment benefits while searching for work in a market suddenly hostile. The professional network he'd spent years building evaporated overnight as former contacts stopped returning calls. Mia found him at their kitchen table late that night, termination letter still clutched in hands that had finally started shaking. "Daddy, are you sad?" she asked, her voice carrying careful gentleness. "I'm worried, sweetheart," Evan admitted, pulling her onto his lap. "I lost my job, which means I need to find new work. But we'll be okay. We always figure things out." Mia's thoughtful expression suggested deeper processing. "Is it because of Ms. Isabella? Because you like her?" The perceptiveness of children amazed him. "Yes," he confirmed quietly. "Some people think she shouldn't spend time with us because we don't have as much money as her other friends." "That's stupid," Mia declared with blunt assessment. "Ms. Isabella is nice. She likes my drawings and laughs at my jokes and looks at you the way Princess looks at Prince in my storybook. People who say she shouldn't like us are wrong." Evan hugged his daughter close. "You're absolutely right," he whispered. "But sometimes being right doesn't make things easier." Isabella's response to learning about Evan's termination was incandescent rage her executive team rarely witnessed. She stormed into the boardroom where directors sat reviewing quarterly projections. "Which one of you is responsible for ensuring Evan Brooks was fired?" she demanded, cold fury making grown men shift uncomfortably. "Who decided that punishing a man for being involved with me was appropriate corporate policy?" The chairman's diplomatic deflection died beneath her withering glare. "Isabella, we're simply protecting the company's interests. Here's what's going to happen," Isabella said, her tone suggesting disagreement would be unwise. "I'm calling a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'm going to publicly confirm my relationship with Evan Brooks, explain that I have absolutely no shame about loving a man who works in technical contracting and raises his daughter alone. Anyone who has a problem with my personal choices can find employment elsewhere." The shocked silence suggested she had crossed some invisible line, but Isabella genuinely didn't care about maintaining approval from people whose values she no longer shared. The press conference assembled quickly, journalists drawn by promise of watching the famous Ice Queen make a statement about personal life she'd never previously acknowledged. Isabella stood before cameras wearing professional armor of designer suits and perfect composure, but her words carried emotional honesty that transformed usual corporate messaging. "I've spent the last decade building a company that makes a lot of money for a lot of people," Isabella began. "I've been praised for being tough, for being strategic, for making decisions based purely on profit. I've been called the Ice Queen because I didn't let emotions interfere with business." She paused, letting familiar descriptors settle before continuing. "But recently I met someone who showed me I've been measuring success using completely wrong metrics. Evan Brooks is a technical contractor who makes maybe 1% of my annual income. He's a single father who prioritizes his daughter's well-being over career advancement. By every conventional standard, he's someone I should never have noticed, much less fallen in love with." Gathered reporters stirred with interest. pens moving rapidly while cameras zoomed closer. But Evan taught me something all my business degrees and corporate achievements never could. That being wealthy means nothing if you're emotionally bankrupt. That success means nothing if you're succeeding at things that don't actually matter. That you can win every professional battle and still lose everything important if you've forgotten how to be human. Isabella's voice strengthened. So yes, I'm in love with a man who doesn't have money or status or credentials my social circle considers acceptable. But he has integrity. He has compassion. He's raising an extraordinary daughter who sees the world with kindness and wonder. And he's made me feel more alive in a few months than I've felt in the last decade of achieving everything I thought I wanted. The ballroom doors opened, and Evan entered carrying Mia, both clearly uncertain but willing to trust Isabella's judgment. Every camera swiveled to capture their arrival. Evan walked forward slowly, Mia's hand in his, until he stood beside Isabella at the podium. I don't have much to offer, Evan said quietly into the microphone, his voice steady despite obvious nervousness. I can't give her expensive gifts or take her to exclusive places, but I can give her something real. Honesty, loyalty, a heart that knows how to cherish her. Mia tugged on Isabella's sleeve, and when the CEO knelt down, the little girl whispered loud enough for nearby microphones to catch. Does this mean you're going to be my mommy? The question, delivered with 6-year-old directness, created a moment of absolute silence before Isabella's eyes filled with tears. If you'll have me, Isabella whispered back. If both of you will have me. The image of CEO Isabella Lane kneeling in designer heels, holding hands with a little girl in a thrift store dress, while the girl's father stood protectively nearby, became the photograph that changed everything. 1 year later, Isabella no longer lived in her penthouse apartment. She had moved to a modest house in the suburbs, trading panoramic city views for a backyard where Mia could play. The evening routine had become her favorite part of each day. Dinner together at the kitchen table, Mia chattering about school while Evan smiled quietly, Isabella listening with attention she'd never given to million-dollar deals. Tonight, Mia sat curled against Isabella on the living room sofa, a storybook open between them. And they lived happily ever after. Isabella read the final line, closing the book gently. Like us? Mia asked, looking up with those bright eyes that still melted Isabella's heart. Like us, Isabella confirmed softly. Evan appeared in the doorway, carrying 3 mugs of hot chocolate, a small luxury they now enjoyed together on quiet evenings. Story time finished? He asked, settling into the armchair across from them. Mia scrambled off the sofa and launched herself at Evan, who caught her easily. Daddy, can I ask Miss Bella something? Of course, sweetheart. The little girl turned to Isabella, her expression suddenly serious. Are you my real mommy now? Isabella set down her mug carefully, aware that this moment mattered more than any board meeting or business negotiation ever had. If you want me to be, Isabella said gently. I know I can't replace your first mommy, and I would never try. But I love you very much, and I love your daddy very much. And if you're willing, I would be honored to be your mommy too. Mia's face broke into the radiant smile that had become Isabella's favorite sight in the world. I want that, she declared. I want that so much. Evan's eyes were suspiciously bright as he watched his daughter embrace Isabella. 2 people he loved most finding their way to each other. Later, after Mia had been tucked into bed with goodnight kisses from both parents, Evan found Isabella standing at the kitchen window, looking out at their small backyard. Regrets? He asked softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Isabella leaned back against him, covering his hands with hers. Not a single one. You gave up a lot, Awan. I gave up things that were making me miserable, Isabella corrected. What I gained, this, you and Mia, this is everything I didn't know I was missing. Evan turned her gently to face him. Thank you, he said quietly, for not walking away that night, for seeing us when everyone else just looked through us. Isabella smiled, reaching up to touch his face. No, she whispered. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Thank you for showing me that the richest life has nothing to do with money. Their kiss was interrupted by small footsteps padding down the hallway. I can't sleep, Mia announced. Can we all cuddle together? And so they did. 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds. Building a family from courage and authenticity and love that money could never buy. If you believe that true love can change a person, subscribe to Solo Parent Stories for more heartwarming stories that heal.